I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, hi everybody. I just touched down from Atlanta, Georgia today, and I am here to record an episode. To recap you, I was just on the Whatever She's Having podcast with Linda Hoffner. She's a total badass in the real estate world, and we're going to do a little bit of a crossover episode, so she will be on The Weekly later this year. I'm really excited about it. Her podcast is awesome. It's kind of about women in business, but you get a little bit into the personal life of them, and she also has some men on, but she's starting season 5, and I was episode 1. It's out on YouTube and wherever you get them. It was really fun. We talked about podcasting. I talked about events. I talked about my coming out story, which I wasn't expecting to tell, but Linda just made me feel so comfortable that it was easy to talk to her about anything. So check that out. And then when I was in Atlanta, I'm sure many of you know I've been talking about the Lesbian Chronicles podcast that I'm partnering with for this event that we'll talk a little bit more about today. And they are based in Atlanta. So when I was there for work, one of the co-hosts, wasn't available and said, "Hey, do you want to be a guest co-host?" So I jumped on that. And I will say, after both those experiences, being a guest is way harder than hosting. So kudos to all the people who've been a guest on my podcast, because it is hard, as Eliza probably knows today. But you're going to do great. And the last thing I'll say is that when I was doing this event, one thing I thought was cool for event people is that we ended up using silent disco headsets. If you guys remember those from back in the day, we used them for sessions because everything was in one room. Think of kind of like a trade show. So the content, we had 3 different stages of content, and people could just put the headphones on and listen to the speaker and then still have kind of an active trade show. So passing that along. All right. I'm here at the Reverie Ballroom because I'm sitting with Eliza Wilder, the owner and CEO. Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we met a while back because I was looking for a space for this lesbian event, and nothing was hitting the mark, and I knew exactly what I wanted. And then I stumbled upon what was Century Ballroom, messaged Hallie, who I've talked to, and she said, "Oh, I'm actually not running that anymore. That's Eliza." So tell me kind of how you got into this and how it's been going.
Oh boy. Well, how far back do you want to go in the story?
I guess let's say, why did you get into this line of work of kind of the arts? Let's talk about that.
Well, I have been in the arts since I was a kid. I started acting when I was 10, and I was in private teen theater companies all the way through high school, knew that that's what I wanted to do, knew that I wanted to go to acting school, and came up to Seattle because this is where my dad's from, and Cornish is his alma mater, and realized that it was kind of exactly the place I wanted to be. So a number of things lined up, and I made it to Seattle at 18 to start acting school. And after that, I also realized that Seattle is an incredibly expensive city to live in, and I did not want to be slinging pizzas for the next 10 years while trying to build a performing career in a city where there's very few full-time performing artists. It's a pretty small industry. It's an incredibly skilled and varied industry, but by comparison to like New York or LA, very small. So I decided to get into the tech industry, and that's when I started first finding the inklings of how can I cross over my BFA in directing with something that is a more marketable skill set, and got into corporate event planning, and that was sort of the thing that kept me sane in the midst of the corporate world. And then this 2 paths started kind of interleaving more and more into my late 20s and early 30s until I got the idea about 5 years ago to start a venue. Actually, I can thank TikTok for that.
Oh, really?
In the early part of the pandemic, I stumbled across a content creator, goes by the Venue CEO, who had purchased a historic bank in, I think, Pittsburgh, and renovated it and went viral for this renovation process that she did. And that was kind of the spark of the idea for me. And since then, I've been slowly kind of gathering market research and looking at what's happening in Seattle until a year and a half ago when I got laid off from Amazon and knew that I couldn't keep doing that, and decided to take a sabbatical. And I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to school or try to seriously make a go of it in the event industry in a way, kind of similar to what you're doing, more of a freelance independent event planner. And that was I was kind of slowly making some progress on these two things. I'd look at some grad school programs. Nothing was quite clicking until the venue that we were using for a monthly dance event I was running closed down. Their landlord had passed away, and the property managers were going to sell it off to real estate developers. And that was kind of the pivotal moment where I just looked around and I was just so sad and disappointed with how many beautiful spaces have been disappearing and how hard it is for any sort of creative business that has a brick and mortar location to stay open and, continue to afford their rent in this city. And I kind of miraculously had some close friends who'd been listening to these, wild meanderings of mine for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Basically came to me and said, what if we funded you to start a venue? So that was April of 2024. And not only was that, one of those once in a lifetime opportunities where you're like, how did I stumble into this? Like, I never would have asked. So we were in the process of, we set up all of our legal entities and we got all our funding set up and we had a realtor, and we'd been looking at properties for 6 months and had 3 properties that we were really excited about actually fall through before I heard through a mutual friend that Hallie was considering closing Century. And about a week later was when she announced publicly. And this was about, I don't know, a couple of orders of magnitude bigger than the thing that I was planning to do.
Okay.
I thought I was going to go find some warehouse by the docks in Ballard and start something much smaller from scratch. I did not think that I was going to be taking over a 15,000 square foot historic ballroom space in the center of Capitol Hill.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing in your story is a little bit of being pushed in a certain direction. Kind of the layoff pushed you out of Amazon. This opening of Century Ballroom being sold, your friends kind of pushing you in a direction. I've heard that from some other entrepreneurs. I'm going to pause you right here because I just want to let everyone know what we're going to be talking about today. Is we're going to continue this conversation about Reverie Ballroom and how it came to be and the construction, and it's having its grand opening. So we'll focus on that in the beginning of the episode. We'll talk about 2 different entertainment venues and a rage room coming to Seattle. Then we'll talk about construction delays with the new Woodinville hotel, and lastly, there's some new CEOs from Hawaiian Airlines, Darigold, and T-Mobile. They're all getting some new CEOs. So, Eliza, let's keep talking about Reverie Ballroom. So, you come to find out that this is sold. You're not quite ready for it. So then what happens?
So I asked a mutual friend to introduce me to Hallie because I knew of her, but we hadn't met directly. And that friend happened to have a lot of experience with the events that I'd run and, really put in a good word and said, hey, Eliza's the real deal. Like, she could actually pull this off. Like, she believes in the thing that you've done. And I knew that Hallie was looking for somebody to take it over, if it was even possible for somebody to pick up the mantle, who was going to carry on some of the mission and some of the values and take care of the people and care for the community that's been built here, that she's poured so much love into for 28 years. And so we started talking in early November. I started getting a little bit of a sense of like what the financials looked like. And I was like, this might be bigger risk than what I'm ready for. We agreed to stay in touch. I had an offer in on another property. She had a couple other people who were interested.
Sure.
By the end of November, she circled back to me and she said, hey, are you still interested? And what if you maybe just took the grand ballroom and you kind of like shrunk the size of the risk?
Well, and let's explain for listeners, there's 2 ballrooms. One's a little bit bigger than the other. And then there's also what was the Tin Table, which is a bar.
Yes,
that connects
correct.
all of them. Yeah.
Yes. So Hallie had all 3 of these spaces. And she said, okay, well, what if you just take the grand ballroom, which is the part of the whole business that everybody's the most attached to. And so I started running the numbers and I was like, holy shit, if we could actually keep the customers, keep the loyalty, and she's willing to really give us her blessing and kind of like pass on this legacy to us intentionally and publicly, and we can start with a revenue stream, there's a chance this might actually work. If we were to actually start from scratch and have to pay this high of rent, no way in the world. So that was plan A. And then we started looking a little bit deeper, doing our due diligence, and I started realizing if we're going to blend my business model that I'd been formulating for the last couple of years with what's already happening here, which is 7 nights a week of dancing, and how do I do that in a way that is still respectful of these communities and we don't lose their trust and loyalty. The best way for me to do that is if I actually have 2 spaces, so that if I am running private events or weddings or runs of shows or things, I don't have to cancel dances constantly and I'm not disrupting the regular rhythm. So then we reevaluated, maybe we do take both spaces. I still had no interest in running a restaurant whatsoever, still don't.
Yeah.
And as we were opening the actual lease negotiations with the landlords and looking at the various options, they basically presented us an offer where if we were willing to take all 3 spaces, because the restaurant would be very difficult for them to try and rent by itself.
Separately. Yeah.
Second floor restaurant, it shares entrances and exits with the ballroom spaces, etc. It would be very challenging for them to find a tenant who wanted just that, and for us to find a neighbor who was willing to be in such intimate proximity with us. So they said, okay, listen, if you take the whole space, we will give you a deal on the rent.
So I feel like that gave you some leverage because they probably were wanting this deal to go through.
It gave us a lot of leverage. Yes. There were some other bidders. So it was definitely a very hands-on negotiation process and a steep learning curve of the complexities of commercial real estate. And I'm so grateful we brought in a specialized lawyer to make sure that we really knew what we were signing. But it did give us an advantage because the other bidders were not interested in taking the restaurant. And because of the interpersonal relational trust that we'd been starting to build with Hallie and through our mutual friend networks, we started considering the option of having the former general manager for Century actually step up and take over the restaurant and become our subtenant.
Oh, okay.
And so that was really what tipped things over into it feeling financially viable for us to take all 3 spaces and ultimately got the bid on the lease.
I like to say with entrepreneurs, you can't hold on to an idea too tightly. And you have to kind of hold on to it loosely. You kind of know what you want to do, but you have to follow the path. And, you wouldn't have known ahead of time that GM could step in and all that whole thing. So I think you followed that trail pretty well. I did read an article that Hallie wanted to keep the Century Ballroom name because now it's called Reverie Ballroom. And she wanted that in case she wanted to start her own project again, right?
Yeah, I think I understand that she has a strong nostalgic and emotional attachment
Of course.
She came up with the name of this thing. This is really her vision of it. And what we're doing is a different vision. And so she wanted to hold on to the name Century Ballroom. And she's probably going to be doing some traveling and teaching with her teaching partner, Allison Cockrell. And they decided they were going to do Century Ballroom Roadshow. And
cool.
Yeah, and so because they
they
still have a big audience base and email subscriber list and all those things, so they're kind of figuring out what their next chapter looks like. At first, I was really sad about it because I was like, man, what I did not want was to have to start over. The whole reason that this was going to work, that we were going to be able to have the financial runway to do what we wanted to do is if we don't have to start over. But because she was active enough on her social media and introducing us, and we were really kind of trying to stitch these 2 things together, I started to see that a name change would allow us to differentiate just enough that people would see that this is
It's a little
fresh
bit
blood.
different.
It is a
Yeah.
little different.
And you've kind of mentioned that. So originally it's been, when you say dance classes, this is like salsa and tango and things like that,
Yeah,
right?
so it's all social partner dances.
Social partner. Okay.
So there's a big difference between ballroom dances and social partner dances. Ballroom dances kind of exist in a much more formalized, structured, competitive world. The social dancers are the ones that evolved organically because of the music and the people and the factors in all these various cultures where like dance just happens. And that is just the expression of your culture and your joy and your music. So we do salsa, tango, waltz, blues, zouk, West Coast swing, Lindy Hop,
Wow.
foxtrot, more things I'm sure I'm forgetting.
Yeah, all the
but
things.
we've got
I think you do yoga classes here too.
Yeah,
Well,
so that's new.
I want to hear, you've mentioned a little bit about, of course, you're going to have a slightly different vision. You're coming in with a new project. Talk to me about what your vision is for Reverie Ballroom.
Yeah, so our vision, first of all, is to nurture and protect the heart of the thing that has been built for so long, that is what everybody keeps coming back for. The ways that this is a third place for people, that they can come back, years and years later and still run into a friend, and people all over the country know about this place.
Cool.
It's actually got a pretty historic and important legacy in the partner dance world. And it also is time for some fresh energy and some oxygen and adding some new dance styles and adding some new programming and figuring out how to make this business financially sustainable long term in such a way where are more inventive strategies to make it financially sustainable than just raising the door price. So that means more hours of programming during the day. How can we have more classes, more dances? That's why we started the yoga program. And how can we also bring new people into this space who are interested in different kinds of activities? And I also, because of my theater background, I am attached and embedded into the burlesque world and the circus world and vaudeville. I just think that this space is such an incredible performance venue that we'd really be selling ourselves short if we didn't also let it be that at the same time.
Yeah, I'm excited about some of those. You mentioned like a burlesque show and just producing more shows here rather than just the dancing. So I think
exactly, like the Lesbian Chronicles that we have coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, we're going to talk more about the venue as we go through these articles. So we'll move to the next one, which is about 2 entertainment venues opening up. So the Escape Room, which I feel like a lot of people are familiar with, and the Great Big Game Show. I'm not familiar with that one. I don't know if you've heard about that one.
It sounded like it was new, or maybe a new concept from a company that's been running other concepts for a while.
Okay. Yeah, so they're going to be opening up October 10th at the Westfield South Center Mall, and another location will open up in November at the base of Amazon Towers, which I feel like makes sense because it's about puzzles and games and things like that. It's an interactive experience, and it's part of a pretty successful trend in malls, the article says, is that it's basically replacing what movie theaters used to do, which is bring foot traffic into the malls for an experience, and then they end up buying things.
It's funny that you brought this up, actually, because these like immersive on-site experiences are actually a special interest of mine.
Oh.
And it's a much bigger trend than just in malls.
Okay.
Malls are definitely one derivation of this idea, but it actually started more in the theater world, like much closer to the traditional theater world.
Okay.
With these like immersive performance experiences. And then the escape room idea kind of sprung out of more of like the board game community wanting to do things that are more like interactive, 3-dimensional, etc. And these ideas have been converging with each other over the last like 15, 20 years. And then there's certain companies who realize that it's actually a really smart financial model with really high profit margin.
Yeah. Well, and I just was at an event where they had the escape room company. I don't think it was called the escape room. It was one of those types of companies. And they did an on-site activation at one of their like big company outings, and people could go in and solve puzzles in the corner. So they're doing some cool stuff. So Escape Room was founded in 2014. It's headquartered in Nashville, and they have more than 50 locations. I learned that it's actually the second most popular because Escapology has 90 locations. The Big Game Show, like you said, is a little bit more recent, and it's TV-style solving puzzles. The other article that I linked in this section is going to be about iSmash. So I lowercase, kind of how the iPod Apple thing is, but I don't think it has any connection. It's New York-based Rage Room, and they're going to be opening in Everett, iSmash. That opened in 2018, and it's opening its 9th location in North Carolina, but more than 75 are coming soon, which I had to read that sentence a couple times in that article because they're essentially franchising. And so, this couple is running the one in Everett, but planning to do 75 more soon seems wild. That they're aiming to open in the spring 2026, and you pay for packages based on the length of time and quantity of items that you want to smash. I think there's definitely a demand for it here. There was one I was trying to get to, but the hours, there were specific times you had to sign up. You had to sign up in advance. It was pretty limited. So I think there's opportunity for more.
Sounds really fun. I have a couple of friends who I think I'm like, I might book one of these for your birthday.
I definitely would do that, especially after a breakup. Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this is that it costs about $150,000 to franchise. That's what they ask up front from the couple. But they said that you typically make a profit of about $200,000 a year. So within that first year, you're making a profit, and then obviously a lot more the next.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys are into the Rage Room franchise, that's what's happening. So I bring this article in because I want to talk about kind of the unique differences between running an arts venue versus kind of your standard corporate room with tables and chairs in a meeting. What are some unique challenges that you feel like you face?
I think figuring out how to straddle the two worlds, frankly, is that a big part of what I have been looking into over the last couple of years is the ways that I feel like traditional arts organizations that do have these sometimes really beautiful, interesting brick and mortar locations are really selling themselves short on these alternative income streams. And if they were willing to make like mild to moderate adjustments to their calendar, or even just publicize it a bit better on their website, or make it a little bit more accessible to understand what resources they have available, they could have these income streams that could, really change what they're doing. And at the same time, we have to figure out how to balance clientele who can pay premium prices, who can pay $12,000 for a peak summer wedding, with wanting to make the space available for, nonprofit fundraiser galas and various other events that we know are, we're maybe going to break even on, or sometimes we're going to take a loss. And so that's really about how do we stay clear about what our why is, and that our why has so much to do with this is a sustainable arts venue, that we're looking at how do we make a business model where this space is still in use 50 years from now. And that means sometimes we're going to cancel Saturday salsa, but I want to cancel that infrequently. And I want to choose, even from the corporate clients or private rental clients, people who still feel like they're going to come into this space and respect that it is an art space with a lot of history, and they're excited for that, and they're not trying to scrub the history away, and they're also going to be stewards of the space while they're here. Yeah. So we're still picky about our clientele, but we are building the calendar in such a way where we can take more varieties of clients.
Well, and it might be one of trial and error kind of thing, but I do think about that. Obviously when I come into a venue, I think, wow, there's so many corporate events we could do here, or weddings or what have you. And I don't know if the everyday person knows this, but you can make a lot more money on those versus, I would imagine, than somebody paying $20 or whatever it is to take a dance class. You can make a lot more on some of these private events. But to your point, do you want to always cancel Thursday Tango, and then maybe they don't want to, you have to balance that a little bit. And I'm sure you're probably dealing with that.
Interestingly enough, we actually did a lot of financial modeling in the around the time we were signing the lease, before we actually took over the space, because we wanted to come in with a pretty clear vision to the general public, or really to the dance community who are the diehards fans, and we wanted to set clear expectations with them. We actually did a lot of financial modeling about what happens if we're all private events, what happens if we're 50-50, what happens if we're all dance events. And we actually found that leaning more towards the dance events is more financially sustainable for us, which was really surprising, because that's durable revenue through the entire year.
Consistency, yeah.
And Dance revenue has a big downturn that happens in the summer because everybody wants to be outside and everybody's traveling. So we had this in our first summer, like a noticeable dip in attendance. Also, the space doesn't have HVAC, which, you know, when you're in a room full of 200 dancers, that's makes a big difference. That's also peak wedding season. And when dances are slow around the holidays, that's also when all the corporate clients want Christmas parties. So there's actually kind of this like beautiful balance between the two.
Okay.
And as long as we don't let it tip too far in one direction or the other, it allows us to kind of even out our revenue through the year.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
So that's the hypothesis.
Yeah, I think it'll work. All right, we're going to move on to the next article, which is construction delays for a Woodinville hotel. So it's called Som Hotel and Spa. It's a Marriott, and it will be operated by Columbia Hospitality, which is a local company here. And it's expected to open September 28th, so this will come out basically when this comes out. But it has had some construction delays. It was supposed to open up in June. I did hear about this because they were supposed to host the Auction of Washington Wines gala there, and they had to last minute move it to the Hyatt Regency.
Oh, boy.
It's going to be 164 rooms. They did start this late 2023, so it's taken a little bit. But they're basically saying there's only 2 other hotel options that in kind of the main Woodinville area. I know for me, whenever it's a big wine, if people don't know, it's a big wine tasting area. And I know we're always like, okay, one person has to be a driver or we're spending a ton on Uber. So to have a hotel option is good. But I wanted to bring this article in because I feel like you might know a little bit about construction and construction delays and all that. If you hear any background noise, I'll try to edit some of it out. But you might be able to hear, we are here at Reverie Ballroom and they're doing final touches because you've got the grand opening coming, right?
Yeah, I've got 4 crews working downstairs doing finishing touches. They're going to be basically working around the clock for the next 7 days because we are opening. We have tickets sold for our grand opening. So like it will be done.
say a little bit more about the grand opening for if people are interested in coming.
Yeah, so we are throwing a big grand opening gala weekend event. We're going to have 3 nights of dancing and live music. We're going to have all of our dance styles represented. There's going to be some amazing local bands. And then there's going to be daytime workshops in all of our dance styles. I think we've got 15 workshops over Saturday and Sunday.
Wow.
Yoga for dancers, tango for beginners, swing dancing, acro yoga, literally all of the options, and highlighting the teachers who are here in our studio. So it's not just, shiny guest teachers, but it's really the people you'd actually get to learn from. So it can be a taster workshop experience if you're like, man, I've been thinking about partner dancing, but I really have no idea what dance style I actually like. I can't decide if I want tango or kizomba or maybe I want salsa. You could actually just come and try all of them in one weekend and get a little bit of a sense of like what you like. And I find usually people kind of find their first dance style because they figure out what music they like the best.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can come try it. Also, there's going to be performances every night. We have these amazing VIP experiences where you're going to get a private tour of the space. And we're going to do this like secrets revealed history tour of the building because I have uncovered so much about the history of the building. So many weird...
When was it built?
1908.
Oh.
117 years. Yes.
So there's probably some secrets in here.
So many. And I feel like I have like more than enough for a tour, and I feel like I've just scratched the surface.
And I'm thinking another revenue stream.
Very
History
possibly,
tours.
Add an extension to the Seattle Underground tour, except this is the Seattle above ground tour.
Tours. Yeah.
Tour.
We'll workshop it.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about renovation. You made some upgrades to it. I guess, what have you learned in this process?
Oh my goodness.
And kind of, I know you had a couple delays too.
We have had some delays, knock on wood, because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 7 days. I am so incredibly fortunate to have a construction PM who is a longtime dancer, who is deeply passionate about this ballroom, who is also just a badass and incredibly skilled in what she does. And my running joke is, thank fucking God for Linda. That's my running joke.
How does that go? What's that saying?
Yeah. I keep telling her I'm going to print it on T-shirts.
Yeah.
And then she goes bright red and she's like, okay, I'm not good at taking compliments like this, but I'm getting better because you give them to me all the time. And I'm like, great, you're going to just have to get better at accepting compliments. So originally, I thought I was going to be PMing this construction project, and I had my fanciful ideas. I was like, I've watched so many DIY videos.
Yeah.
I'm so
Or
good
could
at
be.
researching. I'm great at interior design. I'll do great. And thank fucking God we brought Linda on 2 weeks before we actually started the renovation, because she looked at everything and she was like, cool, so maybe we should get some contracts signed with your general contractor and, get the permits in and all that stuff. And so the first phase of the renovation, it felt like we were continuously working to catch up because we hadn't had the amount of pre-planning.
Yeah.
And boy, project managers in literally any type of business anywhere around the world, they're like, the more time you spend pre-planning, the better the project is going to go. And the best project managers spend double the amount of time in prep as the mediocre ones. Frankly, it's like one of the major differences between exceptional project managers.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the first phase of the project, when we closed the Emerald Ballroom, which is a smaller ballroom to renovate, we just felt like we were sprinting. There were surprises all the time. We barely made it to
What do you have
the
off the top of your
opening
head? Do you have an example of something that was unexpected, just for people that have no idea what it would be like to renovate a venue? Is there something that you didn't expect to have, or some sort of roadblock or a challenge?
Getting street permits to get our dumpsters installed.
Okay, see, that's what I mean. The things that you don't think about.
Yeah. So turns out, and our architect actually had never had experience with this before either, because usually you can put the dumpster on your property and you just need to have a big enough place that you can get the dumpster dropped off. Our architect had not had experience with these types of, it's an ROW, street use permit that you have to get from the city. And you need to get those permits usually 2-3 weeks in advance. And then the city comes out and they put up the no parking signs. Because if you've got cars parked on the street when your dumpster's supposed to get delivered,
it's a problem.
They can't drop off your dumpster. And they usually come at 5 or 6 a.m., right? Because trying to get a 40-foot dumpster up Capitol Hill and turned onto 10th Avenue when there's actual traffic, not going to happen.
Not happening. So
because we didn't know this, we got our permits, but we didn't get them early enough. I think the permit literally came in at 4 p.m. and the dumpsters were supposed to get delivered the next morning. And we were thankfully, oh my God, the company we worked with, they were so good about it. And they were like, we trust you. We will get the dumpsters in. You just have to have the permits in our hand before we deliver them. And I was like, yeah, fair enough, right? This is your business insurance. Linda went to Home Depot at 9:30 p.m., bought orange cones, went and camped out on the side of the building in her car and literally dozed in her car until 3 a.m. And as every car pulled out, she would go put cones down.
Oh my God, that's
and we
dedication.
we had to literally stake out the street to make sure that there was enough space for the dumpster.
You're reminding me of events, all the behind the scenes things we do that people don't know about, but we do it and it gets done. Yeah.
And we also got slowed down in the first phase because we were considering having 2 different general contractors because they had different strengths in the bids that they'd given us and different pricing. And we're like, okay, maybe you do this section and you do this section because this is a monster of a project. And ended up having to fire one of our GCs before he had even started. Thankfully, we had not signed a contract with him because we came to realize that he told us he knew how to put down a sprung wood floor, and he sure did not.
What's a what floor?
Yeah, so a sprung floor is, a lot of people are familiar with the idea of a floating floor where you put down a foam pad underneath the wood so it's got a little bit of cushion and give. But if you go into an actual basketball court or a ballet studio or someplace where people are jumping on the floor a lot, what they do is they put down these sleeper boards of, they're a 2x4 that are placed horizontally crossways across the floor at a 12 or 16 inch interval. And then the actual flooring planks go down over the top of those perpendicular. And that means you get this air pocket underneath. And new state-of-the-art sprung wood floors, those sleeper boards also get spring underneath them. Sometimes people use actual springs, like railroad springs, but we have these like neoprene rubber squares that went under those boards.
So you redid on both ballrooms? You redid the floors like that?
The small ballroom, we only refinished the floor that was already there. It's still the original historic floor. The grand ballroom, we had to fully replace the 4,000 square foot floor. And that floor has been iconic in the dance world for being like one of the best dance floors in the whole city. And so replacing it was a really big deal and people had a lot of feelings. We're actually launching a Kickstarter next week to do a fundraiser for the floor because said original contractor told us it was going to cost $50,000. Once we fired him, realized he didn't know what he was doing, went and talked to the pros who actually know how to do a proper sprung floor. It cost $130,000.
I was just going to ask how much. Okay, well, yeah, it's a bit of a difference.
A bit of a difference, just a smidge.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, I love these behind the scenes stories for construction. Okay, well, congrats, because I feel like you said, you got 7 days and it's all coming together. You know, you made it through probably the hardest parts, I'm sure. We're going to move on to our last article, which is about the new CEOs, because I'm going to ask you about kind of coming into your new role here. So there's 3 different ones. The first one is Hawaiian Airlines. If you remember, Alaska Airlines merged with Hawaiian, or I guess kind of purchased them. And Diana Burkett-Rakow from Alaska Airlines is now going to be the Hawaiian Airlines CEO. She is the first female CEO of Hawaiian Airlines. She'll be replacing Joe Sprague. He will be retiring, but they still report to Ben Minicucci of Alaska Air Group. The article, my one critique of the articles that came out didn't mention her accolades. I feel like they just said she works in Alaska and helps with sustainability. I'm like, no, Diana's a badass here. She's the SVP of Public Affairs and Sustainability for 9 years in Alaska. She was on the board of the Puget Sound Energy. She's a past board chair of Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and formerly the president of Group Health Foundation. So
wow.
That's that story. The other one is Darigold. I bought a lot of Darigold. I grew up in Oregon and there was a lot of Darigold. So, but I didn't realize it was a Seattle-based dairy producer. They've had 3 CEOs since 2022. Amy Humphreys is taking over. She was previously a CFO of Darigold for a couple years. A while back, I think it was until 2018 or something like that, and she's coming back. If you listen to my episode with the CEO of White Pages, we were talking about how most people that come into the CEO role come from a CFO, which is what this case is, and not a lot come from marketing. The last one I'll say, and then I'll get your take on all of this, is T-Mobile. So Mike Sievert, he is stepping down after about 5.5 years, and the current COO will step in, which I didn't think was that weird because I think COO and CEO work together a lot. However, what's his name? Simni Gopalin. He's been the COO less than a year after he started this position. He's taking over as CEO, but he was formerly the managing director of a German telecom company, and I'm bringing this up for a reason. The telecom company is called Deutsche Telekom, and they are a majority owner of T-Mobile. So basically, the majority owner said, use our guy. That's what I'm taking out of it. And T-Mobile is the 5th largest tech employer in the Puget Sound region. So they're kind of a big deal out here. Investors value T-Mobile higher than AT&T and Verizon. Doesn't mean they have more customers. It just means that the investors are valuing them higher. So that's been the CEO roundup. Okay, so Eliza, let's talk about succession planning and transitioning.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for the process of kind of passing the torch? I know that there's probably a lot of, this is how we used to do things, and this is how I want to do things, or, you know, sometimes you want to lean on somebody that's been there a long time and be like, oh, how did you do this? How did you do this? But then sometimes you want to do it on your own. What kind of advice do you have for anybody going through some kind of transition like that?
Wow. Well, first of all, I'd say if you are lucky enough to get to take over a business or buy a business instead of having to start a business from scratch, you're in an incredibly fortunate position because you have years of experience to be able to pull from. You have a dedicated clientele. You have a whole lot of systems that are already in place. You don't have to invent literally everything. But that doesn't mean you do still need to touch everything and make sure that it's, you know, gonna kind of blend with whatever the things are that you're planning to change. Hallie and her teaching partner, Allison, who's been her, you know, close support in running this business the whole time, said something really prescient to me really early on. They basically said, like, we want to give you the opportunity to do this the way you're going to do it. We know that you have a vision for this. We know that you have plans. And so we're going to try and not give you too many of our opinions unless you ask for them. And we're going to try and respect your decisions and support you in the decisions you're making, and to also, be clear about our public support of that. Because I was really clear with Hallie, like very, very early before we even put in a bid, this is not going to work unless I have your blessing. And that's only going to work. I'm not going to strong arm you into giving me that. That's only going to work if we really are values aligned. And I'm so grateful that we are. And that's probably why she's trusted me, because I kept the entire staff. I kept the dances on all the same nights. I gave everyone a raise. So that built a lot of trust. But I think she's tried to pull herself out of daily operations as much as possible, because it can always feel complicated with your staff or your employees if it feels like there's two bosses and they're not sure who to go to for what.
Totally.
So being really clear about what are the major transition points, she decided to stay on essentially as my employee for the first couple of months to essentially be there for when I needed help with various things. In the first month or two, I probably called her every day. And she was incredibly responsive and gave me great suggestions. And that's just a testament to who she is as a person and how much experience she has running this. I mean, we were literally on the phone last night and she's like, how are you doing? How are you holding up? And all of this. And I was like, it's intense right now. There's a lot of pressure.
Well, and she's also one of the only people that knows almost exactly what you're
That's exactly right. That's literally what we were talking about last night for sure. Except she also mentioned, she's like, I built this business in pieces. I built it one step at a time, and you bit off this whole chunk at once.
And at a different time. I mean, you're dealing with dealing with tariffs and different things.
Wildly different economic conditions,
Yeah.
Her rent when she took over this place in 97 was probably a quarter of what I'm paying now, if not even lower than that.
Yeah, I believe it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so she just was in such a different economic position, and she didn't have to deal with online marketing and ad revenue and A/B testing and any of that, it was a word of mouth business.
Yeah.
I also feel like she does a really good job of calling me or texting me periodically and be like, hey, can I just ask you about this thing? And, one of them was recently, she's like, hey, I know you decided you were going to cancel salsa on the Monday night after the grand opening because you really want to be able to have time to clean up. Totally real. I get it. But also that means that we're going to run a 3-week series instead of a 4-week series. And the level 1 class just does not work as a 3-week series. They do not learn enough. And I was like, great. That is such valuable information. I would have known that. I'll do my cleaning earlier in the day so we can run the class at night. Thank you for telling me. Right?
I think that's a sign of such a good leader. I was talking to my friend about this, where you can be confident enough to say, oh, I didn't know that, or help me understand this, or I was wrong, or any of those statements. And I feel like the greater goal is to have a successful venue. So, I didn't think about that. Thank you for letting me know. I'll make adjustments.
I'm a really big fan of the philosophy of surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and who are experts in things. And then you have to be humble enough to actually listen to their opinions.
Yeah. Well, Eliza, I'm going to close out the episode with the last question I ask everybody, which is, what do you do to get motivated when you wake up and you're like, I just don't want to do it today. I don't want to do my job. What do you do to get motivated?
Oh, that is such a good question. Well, even as hard as I'm working and as tired as I am right now, I do still feel quite motivated to do this, but I think a lot about what people's expressions are going to be when they walk through the door the first time, what it's going to look like when they show up on Friday night and they get to see what we've done. And also all of the appreciation and the compliments and the things that we've received thus far, the people who are wow, thank you so much for thinking of putting in a water bottle filler. That's the kind of thing that only a dancer would think about, right? If you're just running a corporate venue, you'd be like, yeah, it's a water fountain, whatever.
Right.
But dancers all bring water bottles, right? So there's just been so many moments like that. But early at the beginning of this week, actually, I hit a real kind of low point. It was one of the first moments where I hit that feeling of I'm working so hard that I actually feel kind of lonely.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this thing that feels kind of monumental and historic. And I don't want it to be the only thing that I talk to my friends about. I don't want to literally only talk about work when I'm hanging out with people that are not at part of work. And I also don't want to have to play the game of, let's not talk about the ballroom, because it's this this
it's
monumental thing in my life. And it's changing me as much as the space is changing right now, like I feel like the amount that I've had to grow as a business owner, as a leader, as a people manager, as a public face, as a decision maker is just like astronomical over the last 8 months. And so I hit like my first point of like just really feeling like there were not a lot of people I could talk to about that. And I actually put up a post that was like just pretty honest. I don't post a lot of personal stuff on Facebook these days, in part because I now am so much more visible that it's like hard to not be too, you're like, where's the line between what's too messy and what's too curated? But I actually did put something up and I was like, hey, like I could use a little help. Like,
yeah. How was the response?
Just amazing. I literally said, I was like, if I could just have like friends, like just, can you just like drop off an oat milk latte in the morning? Like just bring me dinner because I'm going to be here until midnight.
Yeah. And people showed up?
So much. And like clearly it landed, and I realized like I probably waited way too long to ask for help, honestly. And like, yeah, to have Monday morning start with me being like, fuck, how do I get through the next 10 days? Like, I'm exhausted. I'm around so many people. If I don't get enough sleep, I'm totally going to get sick before the opening. Like, how do I do this? Everybody thinks it's so shiny and wonderful and awesome and don't know that you're quietly just like...
suffering. Yeah. Freaking out,
right? And you feel really lonely.
Because you also you don't want to really like air your dirty laundry.
No.
So you don't really want to tell people that you're like panicking.
Of course,
and things,
right? Because you also like, and I want my employees to feel like a sense of trust and safety and security that like, yes, your job is going to be here. And yes, I'm looking out for you. And like, yeah, there are days where I have one spoon left and I am going to put what you need in front of what I need right now, because that's sometimes what being a good manager is about. Yeah, I didn't even realize how getting those messages,
how much you needed that.
A couple people were like, I just sent you sushi on Uber Eats. And I was like, thank God. Right?
Yeah.
Or like, I came to tango class tonight and I left you tacos. They're like by the front desk for you whenever you get out of your meeting. And I was like, oh my God. I had a friend who literally came over, cleaned my fridge and my bathrooms for me because she was like, you don't have any time to do chores right now. And I know you're stressed and I'm just going to make this thing easier for you. And I was like, okay.
Those are really good examples of if somebody has a friend that is stressed out, of like how to show up. Because I think some people don't know how, like they want to support their friend, but they're not really sure how. And I think those are really good examples. I also think a lot of people listening, whether and other guests we've had, any kind of founder or taking on a big project can 100% relate to what you're going through, and the balance of staying strong but being vulnerable and asking for help. I have a friend who has a hard time asking for help, and I tried to reframe it for her. And I was like, well, if you think about it, you're actually like, isn't it good to show up for a friend? It feels good to show up for a friend. And you're kind of taking that away from her. So in a weird, twisted way, you're actually helping her by letting her help you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've just really noticed over the course of the week, from like stepping out of my comfort zone, saying something vulnerable on my personal social media that I haven't said anything like that in a while. And it's been a lot of like, yippee, look at what's happening with the ballroom and this is so great and come check out tickets, and like you're only seeing me in videos where I look really put together and all of the above. How like day by day I've just been feeling myself feel a little bit more shored up and a little bit more ready and a little bit more like, okay, maybe this is going to be okay. Like, okay, I'm going to work some long hours, but also like,
yeah, you're not alone in it.
I'm not alone. And another piece of that was the feeling this balance of like, I've been so immersed in the business for the last 6 to 8 months that I haven't felt like I've had a lot of capacity to show up for my friends or to like really even make plans. I spend basically all of my executive function on taking care of things here and being present here. And by the end of the day, I'm like, I don't have any brain cells left to like message somebody or schedule a hangout or whatever. And so I said this to a friend of like, I feel guilty that I'm asking for support when I don't feel like I've contributed very much. And that friend actually was like, Eliza, you may not have been able to do a lot of that in your personal relationships, but you're showing up for the community in this huge structural way right now, doing this thing that's going to help and support all of us, I think it's okay for you to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be reciprocal equally all the time.
I don't have to keep score.
Yes. That's so true. Well, it's a really good way to end the episode. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think the listeners will really relate. And one more time, the opening is October
3rd through 5th.
3rd through 5th, and they can buy tickets online and go to your website.
ReverieBallroom.com.
Got it.
Right on the homepage, you'll find the ticket link.
Perfect. And then also on October 18th is when I'll be hosting Lesbian Chronicles here at Reverie Ballroom. That link is in the show notes as well. If you're wanting to connect with other queer women, take a look at that. So
we're so excited to have you.
It's going to be so fun. Are we the first event in the space?
You're the first event in the Grand Ballroom yet.
Okay. Historic. Okay. I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.